Is the app gonna want to work? Yes? No? Oh, here we go. Hi, Sina. Hi, Angela. Hi, Mark. How are you guys doing? Hope you're doing really, really good and you're having a good morning so far. Well, afternoon now. But yeah, hope you're doing good. And we'll be getting started in just under 3 minutes. Hey, Lois. How are you? Hi. How is it going over there in Essex, Angela? Is it as cold as down here? We've been at about I think today at 3 to 4 degrees, so not too bad. Hi, Marilyn. Welcome. How are you? Hope you're doing good. But yeah, whew, I am in fact a bit cold still. That's why I'm wearing fluffy jumpers and the heating is on. It's quite frigid. Not been as cold. Good. Oh, wow. Tidying in the garden. My goodness. I literally just went out to just drop something at the post office and oof, no. No, I don't actually have to leave the house again today, so I don't think I will bother with the outside world. I am gonna shield myself from the cold because I actually have a bit of cold induced pain. Well, not so much cold itself, but moving around in the cold without having proper relevant clothes on. I'm starting to have a little bit of soreness. Yeah, no, I understand. Considering I've spent the last 4 days having plenty of fresh air, I think I've I've had enough. But yeah, because I don't know if you have the same problem, but if I stay at home, like when the heating is running for a long time, like all of like my nose and nasal areas and whatnot, they just dry out. It kind of makes me feel like I've just been, I don't know, just having that constant hot air there. I woke up today with a little nosebleed and everything. So I don't like it. But then you go out and it's kind of the opposite end. 4 degrees is not too bad though. If you wrap up properly, it's bearable. It's better than the minus degrees that we had all of last week. So yeah, no, I get it, Angela. Yeah, a headache, right? It kind of like builds here and then that's it. I'm like, doesn't matter how much I drink or whatever, it is quite bothersome, I would say. Plus my radiators are all electric, so it kind of blasts the heat out instead of like gradually building it up. So I struggle with that a little bit. But well, such is the winter. This is what we're supposed to go through in the winter. I think I'm about to have to start, like the countdown is approaching o'clock. So I'll introduce this session, although this is a very casual thing that doesn't really have, much of a point there. Hi, Jen. How are you? Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope you're having a good day. And well, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Lily. Apart from being a historian and tour guide here on HAGO, I am an advocate for Fibromyalgia Action UK, which is the largest, I would say, charity here in the UK for fibromyalgia overall. Hi, Robin Ann. Welcome. How are you doing? Hope you're doing really, really good. And the reason why I started doing these sessions is because I do have fibromyalgia. And on top of advocating for Fibromyalgia Action UK, I do several fundraisers for their events throughout the year. So we started doing this for Fibromyalgia Action Day, which is in May. And as a result of that, we kind of realized that there was a lot of people on HAGO that either had fibromyalgia or other chronic illnesses that were related and kind of needed this safe space. So we kind of kept it going every single month just to have a time of the month so we could all talk about it and know that if you have any problems or going under any changes with your illness or you just want to learn, this is a safe space to do it. So that's the entire point of these sessions. There is no specific agenda other than really raising awareness, making people feel heard and understood, and creating that sense of community that, at least to me, matters a lot. So other than that, what I normally do is I give some details down about fibromyalgia. You're all welcome to share experiences if you feel like it. I do appreciate that when you have a chronic illness, it's not always easy talking about it. So there is no expectations for people to share. If you do, of course, it's within the confidence that what happens in this group stays in this group. No one is actually, so far, we've been all very good and actually supportive of anything else. So if you want to share your experiences, I'm happy to listen. But otherwise, I'll explain you what I do and how fibromyalgia came into my life. So I'm currently 31 years and a half. I'll be 32 in June, and I have had fibromyalgia pretty much for my whole adult life. I originally started developing symptoms when I was a teenager at the age of 16, 17. But in Spain, where I come from originally, it's not an illness that is taken very seriously. And it would not be until I moved to the UK and I had serious problems while going through the early stages of my PhD that I was lucky enough to encounter a doctor that actually diagnosed the illness. The problem with fibromyalgia diagnosis and treatment is that it's still an illness that we don't fully understand. Hi, Holly, how are you? Hope you're doing really good, and thank you so much for joining us. Now, in case you don't fully know what fibromyalgia is or how it happens, it is a neurological condition. So that essentially means the illness happens because there is something wrong with your brain chemistry, essentially. Hi, Celine, welcome. Thanks for being here. For a really long time, we thought it was actually an autoimmune disease, but the studies actually all pointed out that this was not the case, that it was more to do with the chemical issues of the brain. There may be an autoimmune component to fibromyalgia, but we are still looking into it. And the way it works is essentially the following: the neurochemistry of the brain in someone that has fibromyalgia is not the same than in what we call a normal brain. To say that any brain is normal, when you know what I mean. No brain is normal, all of our brains are different, but from the point of view of chemistry, the chemical balances there are more normalized. Hi, Melanie, welcome. How are you? Thank you for joining us. In a brain that has fibromyalgia, those chemicals go through too many imbalances and too quickly. So, unfortunately, that means that those imbalances causes a lot of physical issues to the body that can come and go and that can affect the person on how bad the imbalance is. No worries, Lois. It's absolutely fine. You're welcome to stay for as long as you want or as long as you can. There is no other agenda than that. Oh, bless you. HLA-B positive as well. That's a very hard gig on top of fibro. So I really understand that. Oh, bless you, Melanie. Well, you're amongst friends in here. I think we all understand where you're coming from. So I'm sorry that you have to deal with this, but well, at least hopefully you know that you're not on your own. So once the neurochemistry goes wrong, the three main symptoms of fibromyalgia are chronic fatigue, chronic pain, and what we call fibro fog or brain fog, which is a disruptive cognitive state essentially, because your neurochemistry doesn't work well. Sometimes doing basic cognitive functions like just talking or perceiving all of the stimuli that happens around us in a whole day, which by the way is over millions of them, it may be too much, or you may not pick up on them, or your reaction to them may be altered because your brain is not processing that information appropriately. It's the same reason why we develop chronic fatigue and chronic pain. Pain is a message that the brain and the body throw at you essentially for self-preservation, for survival. So particularly we develop this when we are little. You fall, the brain sends you a message of pain, so then you learn that falling is dangerous because you could break a bone, cause internal damage, etc., etc. That's what pain actually is. It's just a way of communicating with the rest of your body to keep you safe. People with fibromyalgia, unfortunately, fire that message wrong. So sometimes what may seem like not worthy of pain to someone else, for us can feel like absolute agony. I will put an example. I have pretty sharp nail. If I do this, you probably all would think that doesn't hurt. Fibromyalgia particularly affects my hands. So for me, doing this like right now, it feels like someone is actually trying to put a nail through me because my brain just perceives it that way. The chemistry in there is not allowing me to process that properly. And as such, my pain reaction is higher. Sometimes it's the polar opposite. something that should have hurt me a lot doesn't hurt me in the same way, or it has a delay pain reaction. I am very prone to bruising. Like, I don't know if those of you with fibromyalgia have the same problem. I am very prone to bruising. Sometimes I wake up one day and I'm like, where did all of these bruises come from? And it's because in the moment of the impact, my brain was just doing whatever it was doing at the time, and it didn't send the pain message. It just was like, okay, well, here we go. Never mind. You'll suffer it later. So that's how difficult this illness can be to understand, and why we have so many problems really getting to grasps with it. Hi, Nancy. Hi, Carl. Hope you're doing good. We're just having a very casual talk, so feel free to join in. And it's the same with chronic fatigue, because our brain chemistry is not adjusted normally. If we don't manage to cycle properly that brain chemistry, we end up getting tired. The moment of the day when the brain recovers that brain chemistry is during sleep. See, Zina is the same, right? You just wake up sometimes and you're like, what the hell did I do to be like this? But yes, when the brain chemistry recovers naturally during every single biological cycle is during nighttime. There is a million reasons why people with chronic illnesses overall have very many problems to sleep, and particularly people with fibromyalgia. When you have problems such as pain, it's very difficult to get comfortable in bed. You may not be able to actually sleep the whole night because something may start hurting or being uncomfortable. You toss and turn, etc., etc., and therefore you don't get that restorative sleep. When you have chronic fatigue, it's also difficult to sleep because sometimes you reach the stage of you are so tired that sleep is like beyond it. What you need is kind of like a perpetual slumber, kind of like a vampire, to be able to recover from everything that your body and your brain have gone through. Fatigue is not just physical fatigue, it can be emotional fatigue, it can be mental fatigue, and all of those restore themselves in difficult ways and very different ways. So sleep is crucial, and if you already have problems to sleep when you have a chronic illness, that kind of becomes a vicious circle. It is hard. And it's the same with cognitive dysfunction. If you have problems with brain fog and you're having a particularly bad day, you may be perfectly aware that you need to sleep, but your brain may not be actually processing that information and not shutting down. And if it doesn't shut down, you can't rest and you can't sleep, and there is no way of fixing it. And overall, that's the problem with fibromyalgia. It's a chronic illness because it has no cure. There is some treatments, but the treatments only work in about 50% of the patients, which is, it's essentially a flip of a coin whether something is going to work on you or not. Now, those of you who may have the illness in the chat, I don't know if you are on any treatment or not, but since I was 17, they've tried to put me in several different treatments, and not a single one of them has actually worked for me. So I can't actually take any medication whatsoever to try and control this illness, which makes it quite hard because the only choice I was left with was just changing my entire lifestyle to protect myself from the impact of the illness, which actually is quite tiring on its own and requires a lot of perseverance and a lot of constant effort and work. So it's not as simple as you are sick, take some medicine, you will get better. It's kind of the biggest challenge of anyone with a chronic illness, unless you're really, really lucky and it's a chronic illness that has been known for, so many years and has very clear symptoms that map out and react properly to pharmaceuticals. You have to take medicine and work with it. What medications are used for treatment? Well, there are many types, Robin, and I'll tell you some of the ones that have been tried on me and that didn't work, and some others that were suggested and we had to discard. So, the main set of treatments are pain relief, because of course you're in constant pain, one way or another, and things that may help with the fatigue and the chronic dysfunction. So, I'll start with pain relief. Normally, you have, generic pharmaceuticals that you can buy in any pharmacy or drugstore, such as paracetamol, ibuprofen, that type of stuff. But when you have chronic pain, particularly with a condition like fibromyalgia, normally two things happen. Either you have widespread chronic pain, which means kind of your whole body hurts, and overall ibuprofen or paracetamol don't really do anything, they are not effective. or you may start noticing that certain parts of your body have localized pain that is too much to handle or that interferes with daily activities. So again, you require this. The vast majority of the time, they sort of start increasing the intensity of the drug according to the pain level and how it affects you. One of the ones that they gave me at a very early stage is a drug called naproxen. Naproxen is kind of like ibuprofen on steroids, essentially. But in my case, what naproxen did was not getting rid of the pain, it just numbed it. And it actually gave me a lot of other secondary effects that were particularly nasty. So I was still aware that something hurt me, it's just I didn't have the sensation of pain, which was honestly just quite as bad because I was like, I'm still aware that it's there, whatever. So then the next option was getting into nearly things such as opiates. This is when you have chronic pain, the options are limited, and eventually things like opiates come into the table. Some people with really bad fibromyalgia are actually given morphine on a semi-regular basis. You can be having anything from gabapentin, amitriptyline, all of these drugs that are essentially neuroblockers that they try to just keep your brain in check so that the pain message doesn't get fired. The problem is those pain medications can be very addictive, and at the same time, because they're affecting the core of your brain chemistry, they can have other side effects that could be, just having another set of problems. Because I'm quite petite, I don't know if you guys have noticed when I'm walking around on tours, I'm actually quite small. I'm just about 5 foot in in inches and whatnot. I'm quite the normal dosages kind of have to be half as I was a child, which kind of makes the medicines really unreliable and not really helpful. So even basic codeine, which would be just the normal upgrade from ibuprofen for someone who has pain before naproxen, codeine actually makes me trip, like seriously bad. I have bad hallucinations, all sorts of things. So not possible. There are other things to work with pain that you can do, but they are not, let's just say, pharmaceutical treatments. There are other types of treatments that you need to develop. So, for example, for pain here in the UK, they are quite prone to send you to things like rehabilitation and the muscular department. Because even though the pain comes from the brain, the bit that ends up hurting are your muscles and your bones. So I've worked with physiotherapists. I go regularly to an osteopath, which is honestly the best thing ever for me. It causes quite a lot of pain in the moment, but overall the muscles end up being more released and easy to work with. And they kind of encourage you to generally move and do exercise because although it hurts to begin with, you need to regain mobility. The problem with chronic pain is that you end up becoming pretty much just, locked down into certain positions because you don't want to move because you are in pain. And that at the same time reinforces the pain itself when you eventually have to move. It's a very vicious cycle from that perspective. So for pain, for example, that's some of the drugs. From the point of view of the chronic brain cognition issues, they will give you some other things. A lot of the time, fibromyalgia patients have been diagnosed things like antidepressants, antipsychotics, and similar drugs along those lines because it's the only sort of available pharmaceuticals that we have that interact with neurochemistry. Even though our chemistry doesn't suffer the same cycles than someone with a mental health illness, some behaviors and some ways in which the brain reacts to it are similar. So that's why the effectiveness is about 50%, because for some people it works and for some others doesn't. So there is actually a lot of people with fibromyalgia who have drugs for like depression and anxiety, such as, what is it called? The one for serotonin. What do we call this here? Fluoxetine. Fluoxetine is one of the ones that is quite used a lot by the NHS, and several other antidepressants and antipsychotics too. So as a kind of side effect, unfortunately, those type of drugs can then have very nasty, consequences from a secondary, side effect input that may actually end up contributing to the deterioration of mental health. Hi, Graziela, how are you doing? Thank you so much for joining. So those are some of the medications that can be, tried for this type of illness. Then, like I said, there are other types of treatment, but the vast majority of that treatment is associated with a change in lifestyle, which is quite hard. For me, diagnosed 17 years ago, yeah, zero treatment, yeah, for sure, Melanie. I mean, the science has really just advanced recently, so I suspect it must have been bad. Yeah, there are a lot of connections I've heard between medicines for lupus as well, but the side effects are really bad. I've known a couple of people with lupus and as well with rheumatoid arthritis. Those are two chronic illnesses that often fall within a similar spectrum than fibromyalgia because of the way they can affect the body. And the medications are often shared because of the, for example, constant pain and the fatigue that we end up having for different reasons. But yes, the biggest problem that I've had with all of those medications is, for example, that my gastrointestinal system was completely destroyed. So we are actually looking into me having developed chronic IBS because potentially some of those drugs have ended up causing, bad problems. Yeah, there you go. You end up, a lot of people with chronic illness because of the medications end up having really serious problems with like acid reflux, constant gastroenteritis or gastritis, and general problems with the digestive tract in the intestine. Because at the end of the day, those drugs are quite heavy duty for the body to break down, and they just require overuse of the gastro system. Something that ends up suffering quite a lot with those type of medications is the renal system. So our kidneys, the urethra, everything like that, and sweating. A lot of people with chronic illnesses, if they are on heavy medication for a long time, end up developing excess sweating or hot flashes or things like that because the body's just trying to get rid of all of that chemical waste, and it's complicated. So often when you're trying to fix one thing, you end up breaking another one, and it becomes a matter of trying to find the balance, which is actually quite hard. The best thing that my doctor ever told me about fibromyalgia and finding the thing that worked for me was actually listening to my own body and actively listening, because only then you're truly going to know what works and what doesn't. Now, the issue that we have with fibromyalgia and with the vast majority of chronic illnesses is that although there are common symptoms that affect everybody, let's just say more or less the same, there is a lot of secondary effects that don't kind of work the same way. Oh, I'm sorry, Graziella. I have 5 bars of signal here. Maybe try refreshing? I don't know. I mean, on my end, everything is fine. So it could also be the Heygo app. It was actually playing up this morning when I launched it. So I don't know if there may be having, some tantrum there, but I do have 5 bars of signal here. So I'm not sure what else could be. Okay, no problem. Well, the lifestyle changes are super important, and I generally mean super important. I actually kept a food diary for 2 years to understand what types of food triggered me and made me feel worse, and which ones actually helped me feel better. So that's, extra effort that you need to add to make sure that you are doing the best and the right thing by yourself. I also went through different types of exercises to find one that it didn't leave me completely shattered and worse the following day, but that helped me gain that mobility so that I would not end up with muscle atrophy from the pain and the fatigue. It's been a lot of, trial and constant finding new things until you find the thing that works for you. And what may work for me may not necessarily work for somebody else. I'm always happy to share, things that I found were useful because, well, at the end of the day, you don't lose anything for trying, and sometimes you may gain something out of it, but it's not, a guaranteed result. So that's really the reason why my doctor was like, you need to learn to listen and understand you. So when you have a chronic illness, if you want to take it seriously and be the best version of yourself that you can be, with the unfortunate truth that you are never really going to be, what you used to be. You kind of have to do a lot of introspection, a lot of reflection, and a lot of assessment of your daily habits, your routines, and what you do with your life. It's not a pleasant process, but because of that, there are other treatments that also help. There is a lot of work in the UK with cognitive behavior therapy, CBT, that we call it here, because sometimes when you realize you have an illness like this, it's not so much your mental health deteriorates, although it can, but the life changes that you may need to implement maybe something daunting or something that may seem unachievable if you don't have the right support. There is also different types of psychologists and even psychiatrists who specialize in chronic illness, again, not because of the mental health aspect, but because the process of literally trying to change your whole life to keep yourself well is quite difficult. It's a lot of stress, and it can be a lot of trauma in many ways, because you are having to reinvent yourself in a way that potentially you don't even know how long it may last. Thank you so much, Celine. It's honestly, it's very kind of you, and very much appreciated. But that's the thing. You kind of need to learn that everything goes, and what may work today may not work tomorrow, and that is a terrifying prospect. So there is a lot of work that goes into living with a chronic illness that a lot of people don't get to see. On top of that, the vast majority of chronic illnesses, for the vast majority of the time, remain invisible. Unless you're on a very bad day, and this is true with fibromyalgia, people may not know there is something that is actually, wrong with you. So that also means that it takes a lot of adjustment into society and the way you just interact with everyone else. And that is another set of problems why some of these other therapies and treatments may be useful. Because if you don't have the right support network, or if you work and your work is not flexible, or something like that, it could put you in a very tricky situation. It often can feel like it's just you against the world, when it shouldn't be like that. So society should be there to support us all, regardless of our problems. But well, most countries in general and society overall have what we call, an ableist society, which means it just sort of has the basic requirements so that people without problems can operate okay on a day-to-day basis. But the sad reality of that is that pretty much every single human being, for one reason or another, at one point of their life, will not be able to do, things normally, even if it's just because of old age. We will all get to that stage, No, nobody really is going to skip that. So there are a lot of places that are working in changing this, but it's slow change, and that's reason why the change, unfortunately or fortunately, has to start with us first, which I appreciate is really the hardest part of this. Well, Angela, this is the thing. There is actually no real test to confirm whether you have fibromyalgia or not. It's a process of elimination. So I'll speak from my perspective. It is similar and sometimes different from some other people. When they didn't know what it was wrong with me, the first thing that they did obviously is blood tests. First thing always, because if you have pain chronically, or if you've broken an arm, or if something has happened to your body that is causing pain suddenly, it should come up with high inflammation markers, for example. And if they're looking for those, and if you're lucky, you may come up and with a parameter that is outside of the norm. Most of the time with fibromyalgia, that doesn't happen, because although your inflammation markers can be off the roof, unless you turn up to the doctor the day that you are feeling your worst, the blood test is not going to pick up on it, because it changes from one way to the other. I don't know how I'm waking up in the morning, and I don't know if those markers are going to be there or not. MRIs are only really useful if you have one specific part of your body that is really giving you problems, because unless the pain has been causing secondary effects such as serious muscular deterioration or bone deterioration, there's again not going to be anything. So the tests that they did on me were for a wide spectrum of illnesses. There were four main suspects for what I was suffering. Osteoporosis. Hi, Joanne. Welcome. How are you doing? Osteoporosis, which would have been ruled out by a blood test. Rheumatoid arthritis, which cannot be actually ruled out by any of those. It just becomes another set of tests, which I'll explain later. Uh, bone cancer, which was quite scary, or fibromyalgia. Those were really the four things that could fit in with my spectrum of issues. So once they ruled out that it wasn't osteoporosis, thanks to the blood tests and the fact that my height measurements had been the same, when you have osteoporosis, you have bone damage, and eventually, you will start losing height or losing length or general density on different bones. I had the same, so obviously it wasn't that. For rheumatoid arthritis, they normally do a mobility test. So they take you to a rheumatoid specialist, to the rheumatologist, and they do different tests for mobility in your joints. I move them all like, no problem. Normally, if you have rheumatoid arthritis, normally, not always, certain movements will be uncomfortable, even if you're not having a bad day. You will not be able to bend in certain ways or stretch in certain ways, which is very telling that your rheumatic factor is high. I didn't have that problem. So it was literally just down to, okay, girl, will you have bone cancer or fibromyalgia? And thankfully, for oncology reasons, you can get tests that discard any kind of cancer. And obviously, that went through as it was fine. So it's a process of elimination, which is what makes it really tricky because it can take forever. I was very lucky that this doctor was very thorough. And although it took me years to actually be diagnosed, so even though I had symptoms since I was 17, I didn't get a diagnosis until I was 25, 26, 25. Yes, this is going to be my 7th year with a diagnosis. So, that was essentially 8 years of not knowing what was wrong with me until someone got it right and they did tests. Luckily enough, within 4 months, I knew what I always had from the moment that the process started until the last one. But I have known people, Angela, for example, that have been having tests for literally decades and they still don't know what's wrong with them because it's such an imprecise science that it can be hard. And there is a problem in many countries with doctors that because if you don't have palpable evidence, many doctors will not want to prescribe you with something or to diagnose you with something because that's not an exact science. You may end up in limbo for a long time, and a lot of the time GPs don't have enough training on chronic illness. That should be a specialty, but there is often not specialized teams or departments in every city or in every county for something like that. So it may take a lot of bouncing around between different people to actually reach a final diagnosis. And getting a diagnosis doesn't necessarily mean that then you will get the necessary help to then move on with your journey. So it can be very hit and miss. There are some people who get really lucky because they just, check all the boxes and I don't know, administration wise, all of the paperwork gets sorted very quickly and the doctors that they have are fabulous and manage to, sort a plan relatively quickly. And some others that just get caught up in the system until nothing else comes through. And that's something my doctor made me aware of it. And the reason why she insisted from the beginning that first and foremost, whether I saw specialists or not, the main thing that had to change is whatever I did. Because a doctor at the end of the day would be hung up by the system unless I could pay for private treatments or whatever. But the only thing that wasn't stopping me from doing something was myself. So that's reason why I pretty much treat myself like a lab rat, which is nasty. It kind of helps that I'm a researcher and therefore I am that, inclined from the point of view of methodology. But there are things that I've done to check if they actually trigger the fibromyalgia because I just had a suspicion. So I'll be like, right, I know that probably tomorrow I'm going to be in bed, but I need to check for my own mental sanity if this is actually what's making me feel unwell when, this and this happens. So it really becomes kind of a process of trial and error and micromanaging yourself, which is, quite hard work. So if you actually know somebody with a chronic illness, or if you have a chronic illness, one of the most important things that I honestly hope you all get from this is that you need to be such a kind and gentle soul, because it is a constant struggle every single day. Even though you may look absolutely fine, even though you may actually be having a good day and you may not have any of the symptoms flaring on that day, it's a struggle. Because in the back of your mind, you can't help but think, oof, tomorrow may not be like this. Or if you've had the illness for a long time, you can't help but feel like, oh, I remember when it wasn't like this. It's very draining. It makes you double check yourself a lot and doubt yourself a lot. And unfortunately, it can have very bad consequences for the people around you and your general life. So, if you know anybody, or if you take anything away from this session, is that kindness and being gentle and being, just open minded is super important for people who are in those situations, because most of the time we've learned to shield ourselves from the world so we can cope with our already internal struggle. So having a kind word, a generous act, or a helpful ear willing to listen is just very useful. It sounds well, yes, I did then, Melanie, but as soon as they changed my GP, it all went down the road, to be honest. So yes, it is very much like that. That was the only doctor that I ever had that actually took it seriously. I've gone through three more and several specialists, and my medical journey has frankly been quite frustrating. So I got lucky from the beginning, and I was given the warning. I know a lot of people don't have that luxury. Is fibromyalgia the same thing that me? Multiple sclerosis has some connecting points with fibromyalgia, but they are not. Multiple sclerosis normally comes from an autoimmune background. But for example, Angela, there is something that has happened very recently, and that has helped the field move forward, which is long COVID. So when the pandemic happened, and then there were people who had acquired COVID that were not getting better, scientists, because this was not just a national emergency, it was a global emergency, suddenly realized that there was a pattern of secondary effects that were not clearing up. A lot of the secondary effects are actually identical to fibromyalgia and to the general chronic fatigue syndrome, CFS. So it is now, thanks to what has happened with COVID, which is horrible because, this was a nasty pandemic that ended up affecting a fair few people. It's only because that issue has highlighted these long term conditions that now we're getting quite a lot of breakthroughs into fibromyalgia and similar, illnesses like it. So if you know someone who has been suffering from long COVID, it is actually a lot more similar to that. And it's with the difference that a lot of people actually manage to get over long COVID. And, for me in this case, and everyone else in chat that has fibromyalgia, it stays with us for life. It is heartbreaking when you lose one of them. Yeah, I know, Melanie. It is very, very, very hard. But yes, the other thing as well is that um, a lot of the time, though, Angela, and this is important for people to understand, chronic illnesses end up being a bit like, I guess, like a vortex to attract other similar things to them. So, because your body is constantly dealing with this illness, it's not necessarily that your autoimmune system is lower, but obviously you're under more duress. So you're three times more likely to develop another problem than someone who is, let's just say, perfectly healthy. So a lot of people with fibromyalgia may end up with ME as well, because of the fibromyalgia grinding them down and getting them to that stage. So it can be quite frequent, and I actually know a lot of people with fibromyalgia and anemia or CFS that have the combined pack, because a lot of the time the doctors also don't really know when one of them ends and the other one starts. So and there is also the potential issue of mixed diagnosis, since there is no clear test to say yes or no. a lot of people who were originally diagnosed with CFS or ME actually have fibromyalgia, and vice versa. People who have thought they had fibromyalgia their whole life only had a CFS or whatever. So they are complicated. They are complicated subjects that science is now, because of this COVID thing, are now moving. Oh, Angela, that makes me sad, but at the same time makes me happy because I know what that is like. I know what it's like to be at the GP being looked at like you don't matter, or like there is no advancement, when there is clearly something, because we all know when there is something not right with us. Illness is as simple as that. You know that you're sick, and you know when you're not sick. If you're in between, then you probably just have a nasty cold and you just deal with it. But your body tells you in many ways when you are not well. So I'm glad that this has at least given you, if nothing else, something to work with and something to move from there. If depending on what your symptoms are, Angela, honestly, um exactly, the expert in you, this is it. You know best what's right for you. Food, though, I honestly, this is something that I'm always quite hot on. What you eat, regardless of the chronic illness that you have or whatever illness that you have, has a serious impact on your overall process of that illness, because sometimes our diet is kind of triggering our own illness or making things harder, or in general just affecting the brain chemistry. So if you want to at least do something that may have an immediate impact, and that is entirely down to you, Angela, I would look, just have an assessment of what you eat. I like I said, I kept a diary, which is the most boring thing in the universe to do, but it gave me so much insight. And even if you don't keep a diary, if you at least start sort of paying attention of like, oh, I ate this today and the following day I felt rubbish, there may be some points in there that connect and may help you move forward, for sure. And of course, if you are particularly dealing with pain and fatigue, um, I don't know, in what way it may affect you, but I found that after, well, years of searching, finding the right pillow, finding the right mattress, finding the right bed sheets, the right clothes, things like that, which we actually take for granted, is super important, because at least if you are able to create a space where you can rest, then you can get through it little by little. But again, I appreciate that that takes a lot of, testing and figuring out things, which is quite hard. But, like I said, Angela, it is sad, because unfortunately that will happen. But at least I hope you know that, thank you so much for the tip, by the way. But I hope that you know that it's not you, in the sense that you're not making it up. If you genuinely feel like this is affecting you and this is relatable and whatnot, it is them that just simply don't have the guidance and knowledge to take you through that journey. So I hope that eventually that clears up for you. But the best help is unfortunately in you. I hate to say it, because I honestly wish I could just click my fingers and make it better for everybody, because I know it's a lot of work, and I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, and I never do. It's it is hard work. It is hard work, but at the same time, I remember my mom said to me something that was very sweet, and she was like, we all put a lot of hard work in our life because we care about children, we care about our careers, our loved ones, the world, whatever. If you have a chronic illness, think that you're putting hard work because you are worth it and you deserve to be healthy and happy. So, on the days when it's a struggle, just think about that. Think that it's because you deserve to be here and the best that you can. And although it doesn't make it go away, it definitely helps you see it with a different light. Hang on to the things that make you stay positive. Yeah, I know it sounds like a cliche, and I'm not one of those people to, ooh, sunshine and rainbows. I'm really not. But it is important having those lifelines, because they will get you through the days when you just want to give up and set the world on fire, which I appreciate happen more often than not. So there you go. Yes, that's another one good one, Melanie. The the exercise for sure. Yeah, it's one of those. For if you have chronic fatigue syndrome, instead of doing hardcore exercise or any really type of exercise, what you need to focus is on joint mobility. And joint mobility is, a completely different kettle of fish. Is rehabilitation. So it's stretches and it's something else altogether, rather than, doing a couple of squats or yoga or something like that. So yes, it is different, and eventually you will realize what is the problem. And on that note, guys, this is all the time that I have for this today. But thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much, Melanie, for sharing, because I do appreciate it's not always easy to share. And as well for you, Angela, for being so vulnerable with us. Because again, I understand what it's like to be there. So, I really, really hope that at least something goes your way eventually. I have found that medication really helps. Yeah, well, exactly. Sometimes what we need is just to find a platform from where we can move forward. And I'm sure once you actually get that reassurance in yourself and find ways that work for you, things will look a lot brighter. So, hang in there, because things will move on. And honestly, it's my absolute pleasure. I take this very seriously. It matters to me a lot. I've never been shied about the fact that, I have an illness most people in the world don't care about, even though it affects 4 million Americans, which is quite a lot of people. So it's something that I take very seriously, and it's something that, like I said, if me just talking for however long it helps just one person, then it makes me happy. I can go to bed knowing that at least someone else out there is gonna be able to find a way forward, and that's that. And like I said, I think you guys find out that in Hago there is particularly a larger community of people who have similar problems, and who will be very, very supportive and caring if you ever need a friend and if you ever need a word. And on that note, my door is always open. Thank you, Melanie. You're very kind. So if I can ever be of assistance, you guys can just drop me a message or an email, and I'll be very, very happy to oblige. Angela, honestly, happy to, if that's the case. And if you ever want a longer talk or whatever, honestly, don't hesitate. My contact detail, I know my contact details are there supposedly for tour stuff, but life and well-being is actually more important than culture. As much as I'm a historian, and I know I probably should say otherwise, it's simple as that. You being happy and healthy will always be first, and if I can find something or something has helped me that may help you, happy to help. And on that note, I need to go and do some stretches. So I'll see you guys later. Remember, be kind to each other, because at the end of the day, you don't know what someone else is going through. And some people don't have that support network. So you being kind to them may be the only thing that makes their day better. So lots of love to you all, and please take care of yourselves. Stay warm this winter if you're in the winter northern hemisphere, and if you're in the southern hemisphere, stay hydrated and avoid the heat, because I know it's been quite bad. So take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.